Hey guys, welcome to this very special episode of Pauper Ponderings. Before we get into talking about some of these new Dominaria cards and how they might affect the Pauper format going forward, I've had a lot of people ask questions about where they can get one of these Pauper Ponderings t-shirts. Well, if you want to go to this link right here, which is my Gmail, pauperponderings@gmail.com, send me a message and I will be happy to send you one. They are $25 with shipping anywhere in North America. So if you'd like a Pauper Ponderings t-shirt, make sure you send me a message. But let's get right into some Dominaria spoilers for Pauper. So a couple weeks ago there was a huge leak of a bunch of Dominaria cards, and we were kind of speculating on, you know, what rarity these cards were, because obviously as Pauper players that's very important. We need to know what cards we can even play with. I was poring over the spoilers and I was like, maybe this can be a common, maybe that can be a common, and we kind of figured that out here in the coming weeks. Wizards pretty much acknowledged their mistake. They came out, told us which ones of these cards were going to be common. So I wanted to talk about a couple now that I think could possibly work into some decks. Obviously, we're really early in the season. We haven't even had any of the other spoilers come out yet, but I think that there's some cards here that really look like they could be players moving forward. The first card I want to talk about is Guardians of Koilos. So this is 5 mana for an artifact creature construct. It's a 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, you can return another target historic permanent you control to its owner's hand. And historic permanents are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Now, there haven't been any common sagas yet, and there's most likely not going to be any common legendary creatures, but artifacts are pretty sweet. You have cards like Prismatic Prism, Ichor Wellspring, any of those type of cards that are in the Boros shell. If you want a bigger creature, this could possibly be something a little easier to cast, maybe, and maybe a deck like Tron wants to play this card, again, because you're able to bring it into play, bounce your Prophetic Prism, play it again, draw a card. That could be an option. 4/4 is pretty large in this format, especially now that, you know, the Tron decks don't play Ulamog's Crusher. The only problem I can see is that it is just smaller than Gurmag Angler, and against decks that are running Gurmag Angler, you definitely don't want to be staring one of those down playing a Guardians of Koilos. But I could see it possibly going into some decks. Another problem I see, actually, if this card was an Assembly Worker, I actually think it'd be pretty sweet, because you could play, it's the 5 mana one from Kaladesh that goes against an Assembly Worker. And right now, you know, that card is fine, but there's just not enough good Assembly Workers to go get. If this was an option that you could go and get, if this thing happened to be an Assembly Worker, and there was a chance it is Dominaria after all, then I think this actually could have been a real card. But as it stands, I think it's just a little bit too weak. If there happens to be some amount of common sagas that come out, I think maybe this card's worth looking at. The next card I want to talk about is Dauntless Bodyguard. So this is 1 white for a 2/1 human knight. When he comes into the battlefield, you choose another target creature you control, and then you can sacrifice it to give that creature indestructible until end of turn. The reason I like this card is the fact that we've seen Mono White Heroic kind of pop up as a really good deck in the format. You also have those Boros Heroic, or sorry, Kuldotha Boros decks that you know, have Palace Sentinels, those kind of cards that you really want to protect. And this is not the most, you know, embarrassing body. It's 1 mana for a 2/1. That's definitely not bad. It attacks, it blocks. The fact that, you know, it's another threat that you can put in the Mono White Heroic deck, it's unfortunate we don't have art for it, and I'm pretty sure this is a common. It actually might be uncommon, it really depends, but it's very similar to a card from Judgment called Benevolent Bodyguard. That was actually, I just assumed it was the same card, but different in the fact that it's a 2/1 instead of a 1/1, and it gives the creature indestructible as opposed to protection from a color. The thing is, though, you have to have a creature in play when you cast the Dauntless Bodyguard, so it's not the greatest turn 1 play, but I definitely could see this out of the sideboard in Mono White Heroic as another way, as proactive way to protect your heroic creatures. Alright, so the next card we want to look at here is Saproling Migration. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery with Kicker 4, so you create 2 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens, and if the spell was kicked, you create 4 instead. This card, on the face of it, actually just looks like worse Sprout the Seeds or worse Saproling Cluster. I actually think it might be not necessarily better, but fill a better role in those kind of tokeny style decks. the front half of this card, 1 and a green to make 2 1/1s, is a rate that green normally doesn't get. You know, we've seen red get it with Dragon Fodder and Krenko's Command, but, you know, green Sprout Swarm requires 2 mana for 1, and then, you know, later in the game it becomes more than that. And Sprout the Seeds costs 5 for 3. Very rarely do you get the cheap token maker in green, so having this as a card I think is actually huge and opens up some deck building space that I'm really looking to explore in the upcoming, I guess, weeks, depending on, you know, if there is any sort of payoffs in Dominaria for going wide with this strategy. You know what, I have high hopes for this card. I really do like the green token style strategies, and I think that this card could possibly see some play. So this is kind of a, I guess, personal pick, if you will. People who, you know, who watch Pauper Ponderings a lot know that I love the Artifact Matters creatures. You know, I'm a really big fan of Glaze Fiend. I'm a really big fan of Ethereum Sculptor, and this card fits perfectly into those strategies. For the longest time, I've always said, you know, Glaze Fiend is awesome, but you need, you know, Glaze Fiends 5 through 8 to really make a deck. And this card is really, really close to Glaze Fiend. You get a 1 and a white for a 1/1 with flying and first strike, which are pretty decent stats, and then it gets +1/+1 whenever you cast a heroic spell. And again, a heroic spell is an artifact, a legendary, or a saga. So, you know, if you have Ethereum Sculptor and a Serra Disciple, any of your baubles get to play for free. This is going to pump the Serra Disciple. You're going to be able to attack for a lot of damage very quickly. And if you remember my Eggs deck, which I'll put down in the description of this video, that deck was able to go off pretty fast. Now, Glaze Fiend does get +2 for each artifact cast, but, you know, it does help to have another copy of that card. And I think with Serra Disciple, it really opens up a new avenue to explore in the egg-style strategy, you know, with Ethereum Sculptor, with the Chromatic Stars and the Chromatic Spheres, and the Glaze Fiends. And maybe going Esper is the way to go, because you get Disciple of Vault as well, but I'm actually really excited about Serra Disciple, and I think, you know, Pauper Ponderings is going to have a new favorite coming in the next few weeks. Alright, so the next card I want to look at is Keldon Overseer. So this is 2 in a red for a 3/1, with kicker 3 in a red, and it has haste. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you gain control of target creature until end of turn, and untap that creature, and then that creature gains haste. So, you know, the obvious place for this deck to go is some sort of like mono red deck, but I actually think it's much more at home in some sort of, you know, Tron big mana deck, because very rarely in Pauper are you going to be able to get to 7 mana in a mono red deck, and on the face of it, a 3 mana 3/1 haste is really not what you're looking to do in a format where you have, you know, Lava Spike, Chain Lightning, and Lightning Bolt. But in a deck like Tron, or whatever variation of Tron you want to play, this card actually becomes pretty decent in like the mirrors and that kind of thing. If you're able to go, you know, Keldon Overseer, steal your Muldrifter, Ghostly Flicker that Muldrifter, and my guy return the Ghostly Flicker, then I get to actually keep the Muldrifter for good, and I think this is something that could see some play. And I'm not sure if it's in the main deck of these Tron decks, but definitely out of the sideboard in the mirror matches, I could definitely see this card becoming something decent. It does require a lot of mana, but I think that the power level of this card, you don't see, you know, these types of cards in Pauper every day. You know, you get the Threatens, and you get the Active Treasons and that kind of thing, but you don't get, you know, it's stapled onto a creature like this. And, you know, 3 power is no joke. That's going to finish the game fairly quickly, especially if you're able to steal their creature. Those Tron decks normally really operate on a sorcery speed level. They have Condescend, and they have Pulse of Raza, those types of things, but nothing to really interact in that way. A lot of them play the Flame Slashes. You know, sometimes they're playing Lightning Bolts, but not all the way. Sometimes they trim them. There's not a lot of ways to really stop this card if you don't have Condescend. So I think this could be something that really could turn the tide in that Tron mirror that, you know, is so grindy. Stealing their Muldrifter and then flickering it, that seems insane to me, and I think that it could be something that we see in the very near future. Alright, so the last card I want to talk about is Vicious Offering. It's 1 and a black for an instant, and it has sacrifice a creature as a kicker. And target creature gets -2/-2 till end of turn, but if you pay the kicker, it gets -5/-5 for it until the end of turn. And I think this card is a game changer. This kills basically every creature in the format, with the exception of a Boggle or Gladecover Scout. You know, Gurmag Angler is going to go down to this thing. Any of the creatures in Tron go down to this thing, with the exception of Ulamog's Crusher, which a lot of them don't even play anymore. I think this card is going to be huge, especially with the advent of these black sacrifice themed decks around Carrion Feeder and Mortician Beetle. This card is like Mortician Beetle's best friend, and for the longest time, you've kind of seen these Mortician Beetle decks look like they're really sweet, but they kind of just don't have the pieces, and I think this thing slots into that deck perfectly. It's another sacrifice outlet, if you want to call it. It's able to destroy a creature, it can gain you some triggers. This card is going to be insane. I'm fairly confident that Vicious Offering is going to become one of the backbone pieces of some sort of black sacrifice style deck, whether that has Tortured Existence in it, or whether it's just like a Carrion Feeder Mortician Beetle strategy. I'm very confident that this card is going to warp the format. I don't know, warp's maybe a little strong. A little hyperbolic, I guess you could say. But it is going to impact this format a great deal. So, which of these cards do you think, is poised to be a mover or a shaker in the format? I mean, maybe there's some cards that I missed. Obviously, Dominaria is still very, very new. Still lots of cards to be spoiled. As you know, you're a seasoned Pauper player. You know that all the commons get spoiled in the last couple days of spoiler season. But it is kind of nice to kind of join in those, I guess, the excitement of the other kind of players when they wait for spoiler season. Normally they spoil like a big mythic or a big rare right at the beginning, and us Pauper players are kind of left to be like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. What kind of efficient removal spell or efficient blue beater are we going to get in this set? But, we got a bunch of pretty cool presents at the beginning of the format, or the beginning of the spoiler season here, and I hope you're as excited as I am. I think there's some really cool cards here. I'm really excited about Sarah Disciple. I think that card is going to be, gas in a lot of these Pauper Ponderings deck that I play. I don't know if it's going to be tier 1 or not, but I love me a Glaze Fiend, and this thing is pretty close to Glaze Fiend. So make sure you tell me down in the comments what cards I missed, what cards I'm completely off base on, and what you're hoping for in Dominaria coming forward. I'm going to do another Dominaria review when we get the entire set, but I figured, you know what? Why not? Let's talk about some of these cool cards. And like I said, I think there's a lot of good stuff here to unpack, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, guys.